What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I'm AJ Malillo.
And I'm Steven Rombolo.
And you can catch us over at Jersey First TV on YouTube. Hit that notification bell, hit that subscribe button. You can check us out on jerseyfirst.org, where you can sign up for the pledge and you can check out our newsletter. But newly, you can check us out on NJ. On NJ on Instagram, on NJ on Twitter, on NJ.com, where we are now being simulcasted all over there as well. And we're very, very excited for that, aren't we, Steven?
Nah, it's great news. Listen, they got a tremendous following. I really love what they're doing, the way that they're sort of like, aggregating all this awesome content coming out of New Jersey, being this, sort of online hub. They got connections with Roku and Vudu. So we are all over the place. If you weren't getting enough of us already, you can get more of us in more places now. So this is a win for the people, really, I think.
No, I completely agree. And you know what? We're doing a late night record here because Steve and I are like working out a new summer schedule, and it's 11:11, Steven, on my end. So make a wish.
Yes, sir.
And just so that people know, like, we're dedicated. We're recording
We're
late
about
at
it.
night. We both worked long hours today. We're still here.
I was going to say, I walked in the house, took my work uniform off, put my podcasting uniform on, sat down and started. When I tell you, not more than 10 minutes ago, I was standing in work. Like, that's how hard we go with this. This is a passion, and I love doing it. And a side note, I am working on getting a better schedule. So
we're all working on it. Isn't that half of the battle, right? Is getting a better schedule.
Yeah, with anything.
But Steve, how was your week? How are you doing?
Dude, it was a nice, easy week. I've really been taking advantage. I got a lot of free time. So, just getting a good routine back with the gym. I've been growing, which is nice. I was talking with the coach a little bit about, making some moves, maybe looking at another show sometime in the future. So, Prep Steve, Bodybuild Steve might be back in full force. Still haven't heard anything from Rutgers. Rutgers, if you're listening, and I know you are, reach out to me and give me a seat at your law school in Camden, please. Thank you very much. I also got my book for this month. I don't have it with me. I normally keep it with me on the desk here. But it's interesting. It's called The Yellow Pad Method, and it's by this individual. I'm blanking on his first name right now, and it's gonna kill me. His last name's Rubin, but he worked as an executive for Goldman Sachs. He was, I believe, part of the Treasury Department under Bill Clinton. Dude has been this like economic guru essentially for the past like 40 to 50 years of American, monetary history in terms of economics. And this is his second book. He already has a New York Times bestseller. And this details he goes through anecdotes and talks about how he developed this method of sort of like risk assessment and making really great decisions in really high stress situations on this yellow pad. And he, chronicles like these big decisions about economics in the 90s and working with Bill Clinton, and how, like this yellow pad method that he developed was just like kind of what kept him through, how he ran and managed Goldman Sachs, which is, a remarkable take to hear somebody like talk about, because I feel like it's one of those illustrious institutions you never really hear about the inner mechanisms of. So it's been a really enthralling read. I'm banging out like 25 to 30 pages a day, which for me is like taking that and running with it. It's a win. So I'm really enjoying it, and I can't wait to talk about it in a few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Sounds good. I've actually recently started writing on yellow pads myself. That's like the yellow legal pad is becoming my new best friend. So
look at this.
You might have to lend me that book when you're done.
I will. It's remarkable. I think and this guy actually went to I believe he went to Yale Law School. So he was like a Harvard undergrad, Yale Law School. So he started taking notes using the same tools.
Very cool. But
how about
you? This week, man, it's been something crazy. Basically, I've been working at the Montgomery County DA's office. That's my summer internship, and obviously you can't talk too much about what goes on there, but we had our first big trial during my time there, my supervising attorney was on it, and we did get a guilty verdict out of it. So it was pretty cool. It was a very exciting, very good week for us over at the Montgomery County DA. So I've been enjoying it. I've been having a great time over there. Super fun. Definitely makes me not regret going to law school. Like, it's, sometimes you're in the middle of it and you're like, why did I do this to myself? And then I'm sitting in that office and I'm like working with real cases and like actually affecting people's lives. And I'm like, this is it. Like, this is why I did it. This is really awesome. So cool stuff.
That is very encouraging to hear.
You'll get there. You got to remember what's the saying? I forget who it is. With a when you know the why, you can get through anyhow, something along those lines.
You know what? Even if that's not how it goes, I'm just going to attribute that to you because that was pretty prolific.
Oh, it's certainly not an AJ quote. It's certainly a very, very old quote. It might even be like Marcus Aurelius old.
As far as I'm concerned, that is a Melillo original. So
I'm going to look it up because I can't take credit for it.
That is like one of my favorite little anecdotes about misquoting somebody famously. I would go around for years and misquote Michelle Obama, and I would tell people, I'd be like, Hillary Clinton once said, "When they go low, we go high," and without fail, every time AJ Melillo, Mike just went down, was there to save me from the misquote. So similarly, right, even if Marcus Aurelius did say it, as far as I know, AJ Melillo said it first.
It's a Nietzsche quote. It's a Nietzsche.
Okay.
And why isn't this giving me? He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. It's the actual quote. Now we got it. But yes, with a why, you could bear anyhow. That's the brief synopsis of it. But let's get into some stories and get this show on the road. What do you say?
I'm down. Where are we starting? That's the real question.
All right, so I think we should start with a pretty big story that happened over the last weekend, especially in my area, but it certainly affects, I would say, the people of the tri-state and the people of the New Jersey area, and that's this collapse on I-95. Yep. It's a pretty big deal. Northbound going into the city of Philadelphia, which is a major metropolis. A lot of people commute there every day for work, especially in South Jersey. A section of I-95 collapsed. There was a truck that underneath it caught fire. It basically cooked because it was like an overpass. Basically cooked the bottom of the road. The road on I-95 North collapsed. And then, so that's led this whole section of 95 to be collapsed. And if you've ever been on 95, it's already a mess and it's already a problem. And now this is just making it even worse because you have both southbound and northbound in this section of 95 completely out of commission and have to be redone. So the federal government is stepping in and they're going to try and help out. Pete Buttigieg has vowed the feds to help fix the collapsed section. And also I saw another story that Governor Shapiro is actually setting up a 24/7 live cam to watch the rebuild of 95 in that section.
I did see that.
Yeah, so basically it's all hands on deck, and they're saying they're hoping that they could get this road up and fixed by July or August. And Steven, we've lived in New Jersey a long, long time.
Yep.
I have never seen a road be fixed in anything less than my entire lifetime. I feel like they're working on the same spot of every road ever since I was born.
I was going to say, I know you and I both know it a little too well, but the overpass that they were building off 3 by Montclair State University, that was in progress before I started college. And I think that they've made somehow less progress and they are further behind than when I started on that same project. So there's really, I mean, listen,
July
I'll say
or
this
August?
Much. Well,
both.
So this is some interesting information here that we have, though. I'm pulling this from an AP article from the Associated Press. And this is, like I said, a little bit of a beacon of hope here. There was a similar situation in California a few years back that happened with a highway ramp in Oakland. They replaced it in 26 days. and a portion of Interstate 85 in Atlanta collapsed in March of 2017, and it took 43 days to replace that. So other major metro areas, similar stories. The time frame between 26 to 43 days, I would say New Jersey, Pennsylvania, that if we get it in under 50, it's a win to me.
I think that's fair, but you know what it tells me, Steven? It tells me two things. It tells me two things. One, we should probably be updating all of these things because they're literally collapsing every few years. I mean, that's what happens when you don't do a major highway initiative since in what 70 years.
Yes.
Right? Over 70 years. And two, it takes collapsing overpasses to get any reasonable work done in a quick amount of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, that says enough. That statement alone, it like echoes and rings volumes about the state of the infrastructure. Not only in the country, but the Northeast specifically. We have the oldest infrastructure in the country. We are one of the OG 13 colonies. You know what I mean? That's like true. we started
Delaware, the state I'm currently in right now. Number one, baby. Number one, the first state.
So infrastructure in this region that's another one of those things that I would say for my whole life I've heard about all these projects to rebuild, revamp. And, here locally after Hurricane Sandy, there was a lot of infrastructure work that needed to get done that, you hear about projects starting and money runs out. Things get tight. So we have to go somewhere else. And infrastructure is one of those things that is, I would say, not only crucial to, like day-to-day life for individuals, but for the overpass in Philadelphia, this was an interesting statistic. And Pete Buttigieg talked about this when he visited the site. About 160,000 vehicles a day travel across the section of I-95 in Philadelphia that collapsed. 8% of those vehicles are trucks that carry cargo. It might be your shipment from Amazon, things that are directly a part of the supply chain in the delivery of goods across the country. So there's economic implications to making sure that our infrastructure is safe, sound, functional, and, not collapsing. So albeit unfortunate to your point that it had to collapse for it to become an issue. But when we start really looking at the impact this has, to the layman, to somebody who, doesn't care to dig deeper than surface level. Yeah, if you're traveling there frequently, it's a little more traffic. It's going to be a pain. You're going to, have to take the long way home. But let's not forget to talk about, I should say, the truckers, the way that it's going to affect the distribution of goods up and down the East Coast. You're talking about a major metropolitan region in Philadelphia. It's right outside, the westernmost border of New Jersey, which has a lot of shipment centers. A lot of fulfillment goes on in this region. So there's serious economic implications here as well. And not to mention the national security function of making sure that our roads are safe to travel. If there is, for some reason, there needs to be an evacuation out of a city, if large amounts of people need to move quickly, we have our roadways. We need to rely on those things. And, all those three factors put together, infrastructure is definitely something that needs to be taken seriously. And I want to, very, very quietly, like golf clap style, applaud the former president Donald Trump, because he, I believe, had really good intentions with infrastructure. I don't know if you recall his
infrastructure week.
I was going to say his famously failed infrastructure week. But there was a great initiative there. And I think that's something that regionally a lot of people found appealing about him, both as a candidate and as a president. And it's just, we're kind of reaching this point now where this is major news, and you can go, and I think the live cam's up. You can go and you can watch it. You can see how devastating it is just on its face to see the rubble and, all of these things, and think about that being a road that you might have traveled on 9 days ago, that you traveled on for your whole life. All of a sudden it takes a single accident, a fire, and it crumbles and withers and, puts a blockage in the artery of this major economic pass through on the entire East Coast. It's a big issue.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, a lot of that also travel, it's going to deal with a lot of like perishable food items are going to be
Yep.
lost in this because of this. You have to remember a lot of the roads, like I-95 is built for these big trucks and these shipments, and a lot of those side roads that aren't built to have, giant massive 18 wheelers full of cargo over them. They can't withstand the weight of these types of trucks. So that's going to be a whole other issue, causing more traffic in more residential areas and clogging up different roadways there. But and I don't want to get too far into this because we do have a couple other stories that we want to hit, and this could be a whole other show and a whole other, tangent. But I do think it's worth mentioning that, well, the United States of America was a beacon of ingenuity and infrastructure and investment, and it's the shining city on the hill in this idea of that, right? The United States rebuilt Europe after the world wars destroyed it. We're the infrastructure powerhouse. We get things done, and we build, and we make it great and better. And now our infrastructure is falling apart. Now our people aren't seeing the fruits of their taxpayer dollars really helping them in any way. And not to get too into the weeds of a separate discussion, but it's times like this where a part of I-95, one of the biggest roadways on the East Coast, right? It stretches all up and down the East Coast to Florida, from Maine to Florida. I'm pretty sure I-95 does the whole
Yep.
shebang, right? A major artery in that just collapses after we see billions and billions of dollars going to help, a war effort in Ukraine, or we've just spent trillions of dollars in a fruitless war in Afghanistan, and things are going overseas, and they're going to other countries, and they're not helping our own. And again, it's another conversation for another day, and not one to be had right now. But you see this, and you see your own country have a major highway collapse like that, and it takes collapse. It takes the possibility of many people getting injured in that scenario, of many people now losing, time of their day because the traffic, and also perishable items not making, and also things that you are getting shipped and not making it to you, in order for us to turn around and say we need to divert resources here, when we could have been in the game of prevention and making sure our infrastructure was better in the first place, because we knew this type of stuff is inevitable, and we all know it. We're all walking around trying to pretend like we don't know that our infrastructure is falling apart, like we can't see it. Like, I did a project in school this past semester talking about the new bridge standards, the most recent updated bridge standards for inspections and whatnot. And in 2013, I believe it was, there was a infrastructure bill that was passed called Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century. Barack Obama, when they signed it into law, he was standing on the old Tappan Zee Bridge, and he made this comment about being able to see through the bridge. He was like, "Look, I'm no engineer or anything, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to see through the bridge," right? And it's like, yeah, funny, okay, haha, joke, and this isn't a rip on him, but it's the point, right? It's the principle. Like, we know these things are falling apart, and we're waiting for a catastrophe to do anything about it. And luckily, this wasn't a catastrophe. It could have been a lot worse.
Agree.
But what are we waiting for? Why are we letting it even get to this point? That's my issue.
Well, if you want me to be truthful, I'll say this: what we're waiting for is exactly what you just said. Is the catastrophe? Is the thing that gives former presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg the opportunity to come out and make a statement and talk about something? It's not really fancy politics for somebody to get on a stage and say, I promise to make I-95 safer and more drivable, and redo these things. I think we've kind of passed this point in terms of what people campaign on and what they want to hear, where if it's not sensational, they're not going to say it, as important as it may be. And to your other point about, money being spent elsewhere, like you said, different discussion for a different day. But I do want to say that there have been people for a very long time on both sides of the aisle who have been sounding the alarm on that, even as far back as the Bush presidency. Infrastructure is something that like you said, it's kind of like an elephant in the room. Everybody knows that it's here. Everybody knows that we need to work on it. Everybody knows what needs to go into it. But for some reason, if it's not sensational, it's not worth talking about. It's not worth diverting the funds and making the investments. And it's really a shame that it takes this. And I do want to say, in terms of this particular event on 995, like you said, it could have been a much worse. There was only one fatality, and it was the driver of the actual truck that had flipped and caught on fire. But could have been, like, what could have happened is unthinkable. You hear, horror stories about failing infrastructure in rural parts of China where similarly these things happen and people get crushed under bridges and mass amounts of cars, and it's really tragic, and it's something that should never happen. And I think it's part of a country's obligation to its citizenry to keep the citizenry safe, and safe travel is as basic of a function as it gets.
Well, you say part. It's the function of the government is to keep its citizenry safe. Like, that's the whole point of the government. And I'm not even talking nanny state safe. I'm not talking banning 40-ounce sodas safe. I'm talking about making sure roads don't collapse on people safe.
Yeah. You make a great point. Point.
Look, we got to move on here. And I want to talk about this story, and I don't want to talk about it like in insane detail, because I think you could get it elsewhere from from different people, and it's the biggest story in America right now, and it's the fact that former President Donald Trump is getting indicted on these charges of finding classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. And if you sit there and you read the indictment, which you can read, it's pretty damning. It's pretty damning stuff. I don't think you can sugarcoat it. There's talks about how he knew, he was asked to give this paperwork back from the National Archives, like, no harm, no foul. We just need this stuff back. And he said, yeah. And then he still kept it. And then his lawyer said, hey, can we see this so we can send back what needs to be sent back? And he says, yeah. Just give me a day to get it all in order. And then the lawyers come, they go through what he left out, they send that stuff back. And what they don't know is that he's hiding more in the closet that they don't know about. So now he makes the lawyers look out to be fools, because they genuinely think that they sent everything back because he was hiding information from them, according to this indictment. You can indict a ham sandwich, as the saying goes, and that's true. But typically, the federal government has a pretty solid case when it lays out an indictment. Typically, the feds don't just put out indictments for no reason. Typically. Now, this is going out of the Southern District of Florida, which is a Trump-appointed judge in charge of this case, and we'll see, because there is some scrutiny there. But this seems like a pretty damning case that they've put together against the former president. And now, I will say this. A lot of the alleged incidents, you can turn around and say, what about Hillary Clinton? You could turn around and say, what about Joe Biden with his classified information in his Corvette? Hillary Clinton with her emails and the classified information on that. And that's fair. I think that that's a very fair retort. It does seemingly connote a double standard, right? That being said, and some might call me naive for this, some might say I'm wrong for this. I don't want to live in a country where anybody is above the law, whether that's Hillary Clinton, whether that's Donald Trump, whether that's Joe Biden. And if somebody clearly breaks the law and knowingly breaks the law, I don't care who you are, you should face the repercussions for that. Hillary Clinton should have been indicted for the email scandal. She broke the law, pretty much the same law that Donald Trump broke here. And her lack of being indicted does not make it justified to say, well, Donald Trump shouldn't be either, right? And I think that that's the biggest thing here. It's like, we should be indicting all of these people. We shouldn't be letting this slide. And to have this double standard, or to not have a double standard, say nobody gets indicted, which I guess you could also do. But then what precedent does that set?
I think that's equally as harmful.
So I think, Stephen, I want to get your insight in it, and then I have two interesting things to play, because I think these two players in the game are very interesting in saying it, and then we'll move on from the story.
Yeah. So I'll say this much. Agreed. This is quite the damning piece that they've put up, and to echo what you said and what the special counsel Schneider, Jack Schneider, said on this. There's one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everybody. It doesn't matter who you are; they apply to everybody. And I think that point that you hit on at the very end there is what matters to me. Is there is nothing that gets my blood toiling more than reading this indictment, seeing the pictures of these document boxes that are very clearly labeled top secret, confidential, the contents of which obviously we'll probably never know, but there's talk about them being involved in dealing with the nuclear weapons, arms and capabilities of the United States, nuclear capabilities of other countries, plans to invade other countries, like these really high level, very consequential military documents that should not be kept in a bathroom, in a ballroom, in these cases. And one of the photos I thought was really interesting had a copying machine right next to all of these documents. So you don't know if the indictment is 100% accurate on this timeline. Did he make copies of all these documents when he was being dodgy and shady with these lawyers? And there's so many questions, and it is a tremendous national security concern, and I think it's a very valid case, and I'm interested to see how the judge handles it. I'm interested to see what the position from the Trump team is, because like I said, the evidence is quite damning. What gets me in a stir is the people who play the game that you just kind of detailed there, which is, well, Hillary did, she got off, so if we're going to arrest him, we should arrest her. That's good and well. And if that's what you want, open the investigation again and do it. Republicans, you guys have the majority in the House. Launch an investigative, committee into these other things that you have a gripe with. But the matter of the fact is, when we start making the justice system this reactionary, arm of the people in power, I think it waters down the sanctity of what it is trying to protect and enforce, which is the laws of the country that are higher than any person or any office, and that is the rule book. That is what we play by. Nobody or nothing is above that. And I think it's important to just kind of let the case do its thing, let it ride out, and listen, if he ends up being found guilty on one of these 37 charges and he's got to do time in jail, there's been presidential candidates who have ran from jail before. So anybody who's worried about him not having the chance to, snag the presidency again, he will be good and well in jail. He had no problem campaigning. I think it was minutes after he walked out of that courtroom, there was an email sent to all his supporters saying something along the lines of, they can try all they want, Joe Biden, and, he's been calling him this wannabe dictator. And it's just classless, in my opinion, when you're dealing with something that is as consequential as the accusations made by the federal government here pertaining to these documents that he withheld knowingly and intentionally.
Well, yeah, no, and I think two things can be true at once, Stephen. Like, I think that this wouldn't have been going on if Donald Trump isn't running for president in 2024. Like, I don't think this investigation happens if Donald Trump's not the chief political rival of Joe Biden. Genuinely, I don't think it does.
I'm not willing to say that.
That's fine. I don't think it. I do not think it gets to this point if Donald Trump doesn't run in 2024. That being said, right? Again, two things can be true at once. That could be a problem. He could have still broken the law, right? And is it dangerous to get into this game of going after and trying to find where your political rivals are breaking the law? Yes, it is. It is. It's a dangerous game to play. It's a dangerous precedent also. And I understand that argument and I understand that point. But something still bothers me in the fact of like just also being okay with people breaking the law. You know what I mean? Like there is a line and a balancing act that needs to be had where it's like just because it's your top political rival doesn't mean them breaking the law needs to like we need to turn a blind eye. You know what I mean? Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, if a Republican goes in there and opens up the investigation that James Comey said we shouldn't do fully into Hillary Clinton and prosecutes her, I don't know the statute of limitations, but say there are none, right? Theoretically, right? A Republican gets in 2024 and does that. You're going to be Democrats will be crying political persecution. I think that's guaranteed. Now, if she's found to have done knowingly illegal things with the stuff, she should still be prosecuted for it because she broke the law.
Yeah.
Right? So now there's a line
I think
here. You can't keep it's a dangerous game while trying to keep things in order and saying like you're not above the law here, pal.
Well,
and I don't know where that line is, but that's where the struggle is.
This is what I see, as the issue for me with that is the same people that would launch those investigations are the people that will turn around to their supporters in those corners and say, we are going to do this. And I think it's that intention before you start this investigation, before you take this as a matter of seriousness. If you impose upon this situation before it exists a political bias, then anybody on the left has the right to go ahead and say those things about it. And I think it's just a tricky position, like you said, inherently, because Donald Trump is the front runner of, the Republican Party for, to earn the nomination to be the candidate that they put up in 2024, who happens to be going against Joe Biden. But it's not like Joe Biden walked into office or campaigned at all when he was running for office on putting Donald Trump behind bars, which he notoriously did to Hillary Clinton. They had a whole thing. Lock her up. That
sure, but
that's a politically motivated circumstance.
Sure, but not this indictment, but other indictments that came along were from people that did the very thing that you're saying.
Yes.
Joe Biden didn't do.
Yes.
Right? The indictments out of New York were coming from an attorney general who ran on the fact that she was going to, or he and his predecessor both ran on that they were going to bring down Donald Trump and they were going to indict him. And they don't know what the crime is, but they know they're going to find one, right? That's also not how that works.
No. And I think that goes into this line about prosecutorial ethics and, what you say about a case before a case is even a case. And listen, at the end of the day, Joe Biden is not the investigator. Joe Biden is not the prosecutor. Joe Biden is not the judge. Joe Biden is not the jury. And that's what it comes down to me. And I trust that the people in these positions are going to do the right things because as far as I know, nothing about this particular case that we're talking about, these 37 federal charges from the government in the Southern District of Miami, had any sort of political bias pre-imposed on them. I think that this was handled really professionally, and it is continued to be handled really professionally, and I hope that it sees its way through professionally. Whatever the outcome may be, I expect that justice, whatever justice looks like, at the end of this case is served.
Right. I would say that I agree with that on a fundamental level. I just think it's there is something that is also troubling when it circumstantially, right? It leads to more of this issue in the politics of these political attacks and feeling of political persecution from one side and the other. And that's a dangerous place to be. And you just got to hope that at the end of the day, the professionalism and the letter of the law wins out, right?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's difficult for Trump to say that he's going to get an unfair trial if he appointed the judge.
Yeah.
So
I would agree
how that goes. But look, I think that there are two people that have very interesting roles in this. One of them is Chris Christie, right? Former Republican governor of the state of New Jersey. And he really made his bones indicting and prosecuting corrupt politicians. And in his CNN town hall, I'm pretty sure he said his record was like 158-0, Republicans and Democrats.
That's crazy.
That he got indicted, charged, and arrested, and not one of them was the case was that rock solid. I could be wrong on the number, but he definitely was perfect in his indictments of these politicians. That's how he made his bones. And so this is what he says of the Trump indictment.
About blame him. He did it. He took documents he wasn't supposed to take. He kept them when they asked him back for them. They got a grand jury subpoena. He refused to comply. They raided his home finally because he refused to comply.
Right. So that's a brief clip of Governor Christie talking about it. And I think you can listen to more, and I think he's spot on it, right? It's like he did the bad acts, right? So at the end of the day, you could say what you want about Hillary Clinton, and I think it is what it is, but he did this too. Yep. He knew it was illegal, and he'll make the defense. He was the president. He can make anything not confidential, but there are things that go into making things not confidential, and he wasn't president anymore at this point, and the stuff was still confidential.
I agree. I've been having this thought in my head the entire time whenever you mention Hillary Clinton. You know what it's like for me when I hear about Hillary Clinton in the emails is like when people make jokes about OJ murdering Nicole Brown. It's like, if that's what you think, that's what you think. The trial happened so long ago. They looked into it. The defense worked. Even if he's guilty, at this point, it's just a joke. And OJ gets to walk around, free as a bird. And I would say the same thing about the Hillary Clinton situation. Like, it's a great, awesome little reference point. Haha. But they did the investigation. Nothing came of it. And she's walking around. And to use that as like the backboard, the same way somebody came up and made an OJ Simpson joke and laughed about it. It's funny, but for some reason, Hillary Clinton goes under an investigation, gets acquitted, nothing happened, and
she didn't get acquitted.
Wrong.
She didn't get acquitted. That's a mistake. Like, it wasn't. The only reason she didn't get indicted is because she was the person running for the Democratic ticket, and James Comey didn't want to throw that wrench into the political system, right? He openly said it. He openly said, like, what she did was bad, but we don't want to go further because there's going to be an election in November, right? So it's not as clear cut as you're making it out, that it's like she was found innocent. No, she wasn't. She wasn't even. It didn't even get to that point because they didn't want to ruin the political process, and that's why I think it is an apt analogy. I don't necessarily disagree with them going after Trump. I just think they should have also went after her.
Listen, at this point, the major concern for me is the fact that this man is sitting on, like you said, like Chris Christie said, he knew it was wrong. And this is not to mention the driver who's also indicted on some of the same charges, that was allegedly coordinating with Trump moving these documents around. They're not even allowed to speak to each other per order of the judge on this case. So I think that just kind of also plays into this notion that there was a lot of willful intent to make sure that these documents were not given back to the people that they belonged to.
Absolutely. And I think this last clip is pretty important. And this is from the former Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr.
What about this chief argument that comes up for the president's allies and his legal team that this should have been handled under the Presidential Records Act, not this Espionage Act charge and other federal statutes that were used here?
Well, it started out under the Presidential Records Act and the archives trying to retrieve documents that Trump had no right to have. But it quickly became clear that what the government was really worried about were these classified and very sensitive documents. I was shocked by the degree of sensitivity of these documents and how many there were, frankly. And so the government's agenda was to get those, protect those documents and get them out. And I think it was perfectly appropriate to do that. It was the right thing to do. And I think the counts under the Espionage Act that he willfully retained those documents are solid counts. Now, I do think we have to wait and see what the defense says and what proves to be true. But I do think that even half what Andy McCarthy said, which is if even half of it is true, then he's toast. I mean, it's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning. And this idea of presenting Trump as a victim here, a victim of a witch hunt, is ridiculous. Yes, he's been a victim in the past. Yes, his adversaries have obsessively pursued him with phony claims, and I've been at his side defending against them when he is a victim. But this is much different. He's not a victim here. He was totally wrong that he had the right to have those documents. Those documents are among the most sensitive secrets that the country has. They have to be in the custody of the archivist. He had no right to maintain them and retain them. And he kept them in a way at Mar-a-Lago that anyone who really cares about national security, their stomach would churn at it.
Right. So that's Bill Barr. And I think the thing about Bill Barr and Chris Christie in these comments that's so, I don't know, intriguing to me is that these are people that were very big Trump defenders in the past.
Yeah.
And when they thought he was being wrongfully attacked, they said it and they defended him and they ruthlessly defended him. And now they're both not defending him anymore. Now, some people might say like, oh, well, he turned his back on them and this is now just revenge and, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know. I think that these are two men who really, really regard the law. They have very high regard for the law. And they both made their bones as very respected prosecutors and people that are very good at their jobs. And genuinely, I think that that their opinions hold a lot of weight here because these are people that worked with Trump, they were friends with Trump, and now they both pretty much turn around and say the same thing. And Andy McCarthy too, who was referenced by Bill Barr in that, is another guy. He defended Trump when he thought that Trump was being wrongfully accused, and now he's like, this is pretty damning. So
I would agree with you. And icing on the cake is that Bill Barr was Trump's selected attorney general while he spent most of his time in the White House. So somebody that Trump saw fit to act as the, prosecutor for the country, like who held that, most prestigious position in that legal field. So I would agree with you. And I think it's a big moment for the country. And, to hear those two men, like you said, very well respected, same aisle as Donald Trump, once allies of Donald Trump. Chris Christie, after he dropped out in 2016, was very much vying to get the position that Bill Barr ended up getting as Attorney General for the United States. So when you say that these are two men who have deep reverence and respect for the laws of this country, I also agree with that. And for them to, acknowledge all of the facts that are true about them and their relationship with Donald Trump and, party lines and all of those things, and still come out and say what they said about this case and about the former president, fully affirms, what we started off with talking about the story by saying this is quite damning. This is troubling. And it is a tremendous moment, for the history of the country now and looking forward as to how we handle situations of this magnitude.
Yeah, for sure. And unfortunately, we're over the time, and we're gonna have to cut our last story. But I just want to make one final point before we wrap up. It's very interesting to see now, as we talked about last week, all of these people jumping into the Republican race, and now this comes out, and to see the different reactions of all of the different candidates. And I think that what you saw Florida Governor Ron DeSantis blamed the charges on the weaponization of the federal law enforcement. You saw Vivek Ramaswamy come out and immediately say that he would pardon the former president of the United States if he won the office. You had Mike Pence, who kind of gave I'd say a mealy-mouthed response saying, having read the indictment, these are very serious allegations, and I can't defend what is alleged. But the president is entitled to his day in court. He's entitled to bring a defense, and I want to reserve my judgment until he has the opportunity to respond. Fair enough. But now you're talking about Mike Pence, who was the former president of the United States, and worked very, very closely.
Vice president.
I'm sorry, the former vice president of the United States, who worked very, very closely with the former president of the United States, clearly. Then you had Nikki Haley, who also was in the Trump administration, and said that this was prosecutorial overreach, double standards, and vendetta politics. If the indictment is true, if what it says is actually the case, President Trump has been incredibly reckless with our national security. I'm a military spouse. My husband is about to deploy this weekend. This puts all of our military men and women in danger. Tim Scott said a justice system where the scales are weighted is troubling, but he said this is a serious case with serious allegations. Obviously, we said what Chris Christie said. So you're seeing a lot of people come out that are opposed to Donald Trump. They're running against him, and you're seeing them kind of form these different ways. Ron DeSantis, who probably has the most to gain for saying, Donald Trump did something wrong, is sort of afraid to make that attack, seemingly. Vivek Ramaswamy, who has nothing to gain either way, comes out the strongest in support of Donald Trump. And then you have guys like Chris Christie, who come out the strongest against him. You have Mike Pence, his former vice president, who's trying to show that he is not just a Trump acolyte, coming out fairly strong against it. And Nikki Haley coming out giving a little bit of both sides of the fence, and Tim Scott giving a little bit of both sides of the fence. So we'll see how it continues to shake out. But I found it very interesting to see how these political players are acting within this indictment.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, it's only going to get more tumultuous as this case progresses. I think Mike Pence gave like the most. That's like if you typed in ChatGPT how to respond to the situation, that's what it would put out. It was like AI wrote that statement for Mike Pence. But I understand why he took that approach. And I think it's interesting because he was so adamant and cutthroat, when addressing the situation surrounding January 6th and saying, the former president wanted me to choose country, or him, and it's an easy decision for me every day. I'll protect the laws of the land and this and that. And, when a similar allegation comes up, you're dealing with the Espionage Act, you're dealing with, these very insanely high level national security secrets. He just kind of goes as middle of the road as possible. I think Mike Pence is playing it a little bit too safe, in my opinion. But, point of the matter for me is, as much as this is a great opportunity in, presidential politics in the 2024 election to get points, I don't ever want it to feel like that's all this is, because it is a really serious allegation. It is a really serious moment of legal precedent. This is going to be something that we talk about for, the enduring history of this nation. And what happens when the people who sit in the highest seats, do this caliber of wrong? How do we hold them accountable? What does accountability look like? What is the responsibility of, the government to address those things? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot that remains to be seen and heard. I'm, curious to understand and hear what his defense is, because the pictures are grotesque of where these things were kept. And like Bill Barr said, anybody who, has any ounce of respect for national security, their stomach would turn. If you see these boxes of old, like, office document things sitting in a bathroom in Mar-a-Lago, it's disgraceful. It's really shameful. And, the presumption of innocence remains, but doesn't seem like it's going to bode well for the former president. Nevertheless, I'm sure we will see the live streams from whatever prison he ends up in, you know, he'll have an Al Capone situation. Maybe they'll let him pimp out his cell and make it look like the Oval Office if he wins from jail.
Well, I guess he could pardon himself at that point. But
Some might say.
I guess we will see going forward. But with that, this has been another episode of Bridging the Gap here on Jersey First TV and on NJ. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was a pleasure, and I hope you all have a great week. I'm AJ Malillo.
I'm Steven Romola.
Bye, everybody.